To those who have just joined us, we're just giving 2 minutes grace period for those who may be trying to log on. We will begin in 1 minute. Okay, again, good evening to everyone. Give me 1 second, I'm having a little bit of a Bluetooth issue. Can you hear me? Yes, thumbs up from our panelists. All right, fantastic. To all of our community members who joined us, thank you so much for this Q&A following up on our recent virtual town hall meeting. I want to go around our boxes here and just introduce everyone, just in case some are not familiar with everyone here. Why don't we start with our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, Dr. Matt Freeman. Can you wave, Dr. Freeman?
Good evening, everyone.
And we have our Assistant Superintendent for Access and Equity, Dr. Perez.
Good evening, everyone.
And our Assistant Superintendent for Special Services, Dr. Alegria.
Good evening, everyone.
Our School Business Administrator and Board Secretary, Mr. Roth.
Good evening and welcome.
I'm sorry, it's like Ann. Oh, there you are, Ann. Our Director for C&I, my boxes are jumping around a little bit. Ann Bodner.
Hi, everyone.
Our HR Director, Ms. Stacy Robinson.
Good evening, everyone.
Our Director of Technology, Mr. Bonds.
Good evening.
Our Head Nurse and all-around Master of Health and Safety, Nurse Julie Porter.
Oh, thank you. Hi, everybody.
And of course, the Principal of Columbia High School, Mr. Frank Sanchez.
Good evening. Thank you.
The person who you cannot see is our lead for our communications department, Ms. Anit Eustache. And Ms. Eustache and Mr. Bonds are going to work for us to be able to share our screens and have a conversation that we hope will answer the questions that were outstanding from our recent webinar. And so it looks like we have right now 248 participants who are coming in through WebEx. We, of course, are also streaming this through our YouTube channel. We're going to go now to begin sharing our screen so that you can see the responses to the questions that we have received. And again, thank you to those who contributed more than 200 questions to tonight's conversation. We were able to take those questions and put them into buckets. As you can imagine, there were some very similar questions put forward that we were able to align for a conversation this evening. I'm going to change my screen just a little bit so I'm able to see better. All right, so again, this is a Q&A session that is following our recent virtual webinar, which served as a town hall around our reopening plans for January the 19th. We can go to the next slide, please. That is who I am. I didn't introduce myself. I'm Ron Taylor, your Superintendent of Schools. So just a very brief recap. For those who may not recall from the information that we've shared, we are using a phased-in approach towards our reopening. That first current status reflects phase 1, which is our virtual learning sessions that we're in right now. Both our students and our teachers are in a virtual learning component where they are teaching and learning from their homes or places that are outside of our school district. We will be moving to phase 2 on January the 11th. There were some questions around what that means, right? So January 11th, our teachers will be able to voluntarily return to their school buildings and work on improving, their classrooms and making them look beautiful and prepared for students' return. Why is that voluntary? Because we understand that our teachers also have families and they have to make changes, and we want to give them a grace period to be able to change their whatever is going on in their home and personal lives before returning to in person. But this phase is also very important because it helps us to have our teachers broadcasting and teaching live from the school buildings, because even though we've done many walkthroughs to check our connectivity, Mr. Bonds and his team have gone through with all kind of devices that to check and make sure that all of our access points and our Wi-Fi hotspots are working. There's still, of course, the chance that when teachers come in and they start broadcasting, that we will find more dead spots that we can correct, and we are prepared to correct them. Beginning on January 13th, teachers will return again within phase 2, and as well as our other school-based administrators and central office folks will come to our brick and mortar sites under a mandatory request from our school district. And so all of our virtual broadcasting for that week for phase 2 will be from our school sites, with the exception of those first 2 days, which are voluntary. As you can see, and again, I won't insult you, insult your intelligence by reading all this entire slide to you, but as you've seen previously from our presentations, each of these phases gets us close to what we all want, which is a phase 5 fully reopened. And we know that phase 5 is really governed by the state. The governor's executive orders state that students can select to be all virtual via the requests of their parents. So we have to always have some type of hybrid approach to be able to be compliant with that governor's executive order. And again, phase 3 and phase 4 are speaking about the different levels of grades that will be returning and the pace of that returning. If all goes well, as we certainly hope and are working for it to be, by January 25th, all the students who have selected hybrid will be able to return to our in-person setting. Next slide, please. So this is an important point of clarification. During our pre-recorded session, we received some of this feedback from the as-is hypothetical session. The pre-recorded presentation seemed to contradict itself. I'm now reading this question that came from someone in our community. Early on, Superintendent Taylor noted that students who choose virtual could not revise that decision at a later point and move to hybrid live instruction. Later in the presentation, it seemed that students could indeed revise that decision, but at the end of the marking period. Can you please provide clarity on what point in time a revision can be made? Here's another question that came. If student chooses virtual to start, can they switch to hybrid in March? If they start hybrid and are not comfortable after the first day, can they switch to virtual and still have all their same teachers? There's some confusion here, right? And so when there's confusion in the message, it is the accountability falls on the messenger. So I take responsibility for whatever confusion was here, and we have an answer to these two questions. Next slide, please. So I hope this is very clear. Our as is hypothetical. The virtual as is question was included as part of our return to school preference form. The purpose of it was to collect data and get a better idea of the percentage of parents who feel strongly about keeping our virtual option explicitly as is. The information shared on slide 25 in the key consideration section from our December 17th return to school presentation outlined the steps that would be needed to keep our virtual as is. We understand that it is not very likely. However, we wanted to make sure that we were making an informed decision. We tried to make a clear delineation between our plan and this option, depending upon the feedback received from the community. Next slide, please. By far, the majority of our questions received for this Q&A really centered around academics and scheduling. So we are very pleased to respond to these questions. And again, we have bucketed these questions because, as you can imagine, we've received very similar questions. The total was approximately 200 or so questions, but we were able to put them into very similar categories. And we have experts here from your school district who can help us to respond to them. Next slide, please. All right, academics. Switching schedules. The question reads, how will re-registration work for families who left the district and want to return if schools open for a hybrid instruction? If student chooses virtual to start, can they switch to hybrid at the start or at the start of the next marking period? If they start hybrid and are not comfortable after the first day, can they switch to virtual and still have all their same teachers? Great question. So we will pass this on to our C and I team, Ann Bodner and Matt Friedman, whichever would like to respond to this question, please feel free.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. Let's tackle the first one. How will re-registration work for families who left the district and want to return if schools open for a hybrid instruction? They'll have to go through back through the registration process as we normally would. If you need assistance with that, you can contact central office, you can contact HR department, contact myself or Dr. Perez to talk about the steps of re-registration. If a student chooses virtual to start, can they switch to hybrid at the start of the next marking period? The short answer is yes. Much like the scheduling with both hybrid and remote learning, things are very fluid. So we want students the ability, if they don't feel comfortable in one setting, to be able to switch to another setting. And the third question, if they start hybrid and are comfortable, dovetails into the second question. They can, as I mentioned, switch. They will have, if they switch to virtual, they will have all their same teachers because it is, yes, I'm sorry. Yes, I was just rereading the rest of that question. So yes, they will have the same teachers if they switch back to virtual.
Yes. And I'm just going to add in, Dr. Friedman, that they should reach out to their principals. So if they are hybrid and would like to go back to virtual, they should reach out to their school principals.
Thank you both. And so again, to reiterate, just in any type of circumstance, if you are a student and you want to, and your family decides to withdraw you from the school district, you work with your school. If you're trying to register, you work through the registration office in central administration, and there's still all the same registration rules that apply. And if you are switching from virtual to a hybrid or back and forth, you will work with your school principal to make that happen, and you will keep the same teachers. Next slide, please. This has been a really hot topic for us, devices for in-person students. We've been really giving this a lot of consideration. We've been discussing this topic with our task force participants who are, in some cases teachers, right? So we're able to get a real granular look at these questions. And I will again read the questions. Students will need their devices on school to allow, and I will now hand this right over to Ann Bodner.
Great, thank you, Dr. Taylor. So we are asking that all of our students from kindergarten through 12th grade to bring their devices to school if they are in person. We're asking this so that we can do a few different things. One, many of our teachers, before we even started in the pandemic, incorporated technology into their lessons. So we want to make sure that our teachers can continue to teach as they did during that time. We also know that many of our students are doing a lot of their work on Google. and not necessarily like in writing journals and on paper. So if we are in person, our students need to be able to access those writing pieces so that they can continue working. And then finally, we also need to be able to use online books and texts in order to limit sharing of materials. And I just want to add in there that especially at all levels, but especially at the elementary level where there are many manipulatives and things like that, we handed out an awful lot of our materials. Okay. Oh, we handed out a lot of our materials to students to use at home. So our classrooms are actually very bare in that sense. So we will be able to use our computers to use online tools like math manipulatives. And then finally, if you would, when you send your child to school, please, please, please make sure that you are sending them with a fully charged device. We want to keep the cords to a minimum in the classroom. Our power cords also, because sometimes the batteries do run out quickly. And then finally, for kindergarten through 5th grade, would you please send, if you have them at home from the schools, the whiteboards and their markers. This will allow our teachers in class to use different modalities, whether sometimes they'll be on the computers and sometimes they won't be. But the whiteboards allow our teachers to see a lot of work without having papers and also being able to socially distance.
Dr. Taylor, you're muted.
Testing? Yes. All right. What's funny is I was going to say, Anne, in the middle of your discussion, you blanked out for me, but maybe it was just me. Did everyone else hear Anne's full response? Okay, so it was just me. So just to add to that response, we did give this a lot of thought because we know that screen time is a challenge. But as Anne described, there's so many factors that support us bringing the devices back to school to just really have everyone engaged, to have the students who are hybrid and the students who are at home in sync. The next question here, how will the virtual days for hybrid students be different from the existing all virtual schedule? Will there be more asynchronous learning? What will in-class participation be like for students who are virtual when others are in class? And there's some interesting specificity there. Dr. Friedman and Bodman?
Certainly. Thank you, Dr. Taylor. We just want you to understand that in a hybrid setting, in this scenario, teaching students simultaneously, both virtually and face-to-face, is something that will continue to evolve over time. It is our hope and anticipation that we're both teaching to both types of students at the same time. The different instructional practices will vary by day. So when I'm looking at the part of question number 2, please specify where the teacher will be and whether in-class students will be on computers with their at-home classmates. We plan on having small group instruction that will combine both in-class students and virtual students through leveraging the use of technology. But as Ms. Bodner indicated earlier, we are going to vary our learning modalities. We do not want students that are face-to-face be on technology the whole time, nor do we want students at home being on computers the whole time as well. They will receive assignments, they can print them out, they can work offline. There's going to be a lot of variance in what we do. So we're excited about the ongoing instructional strategies that will continue to evolve, but I can assure you that the amount of asynchronous time will not go up just because they are in a virtual setting. It is our anticipation that the cameras will be on during the morning session and then in the afternoon for small groups and things of that nature. So there'll be a lot of interactivity just as the students were in class with the teachers speaking both to face-to-face students and to the students in a virtual setting that day.
Thank you, Dr. Friedman. And we understand that this is a very passionate topic for our families. Families want to know what the framework will be, right? And so I hope you took from Dr. Friedman's and Ann Bodner's responses that students will be in class with their Chromebooks or devices. Students at home will also be on their devices, and the teacher will be able to engage both groups. However, there's a lot of different strategies that can help students with different learning styles, right? And so we don't want to do any single thing all the time. And so there will be some variance, but our framework will still be Canvas. Our framework will still be governed very similar to what you're experiencing right now. And of course, there's creativity amongst teachers. Teachers will do great things based on their own creativity. We don't want them to be robots. We want them to show their talents, but we want to make sure that you understand, you leave here with the framework of what's going to be guiding us moving forward. Next slide, please. So continuing on that discussion, elementary sample schedule, anything we want to point out here at CE19?
Yes, I just wanted to give this is a sample schedule using the late school schedule. Obviously, for all students in the elementary school students in the district, the times will change based on whether you are an early school or a late school. And I believe some of that more specific start and end times will come from the buildings themselves. But just to know what your student could be going through on a typical day. So all students at the elementary level and on up will be greeted by staff greeters in the first thing in the morning. Teacher and virtual students will log on to their computers for this situation, for late students, it would be 8:45 each day. And then teachers will have their cameras on for all 4 hours in the morning, engaging and interacting with both in-person and virtual students. So you'll see here that our days start with morning meeting. They'll move into math and reading and science, social studies. They will have their specials. Now there is going to be a little bit of a difference when it comes to specials. The third phase, when our K2 students come in, we will continue to have our specials in the afternoon, just as they are now. But once we go into phase 4 and our specials go, and our 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade students come in, we will then be going to our normal building half-day schedule. So your kindergartner could have PE at 9:20. But again, phase 3, kindergarten through 2nd, staying in the afternoon. And then once all of our elementary students return, we'll be going back to our normal schedule. I do want to say that, for our structure of our lessons, and this is really how it is for pretty much all grade levels, but we do start our lessons with mini lessons or new instruction, where the teacher really will be giving about 10 to 15 minutes of new learning and new instruction. And then after that, it's going to truly depend upon what the lesson is, what is appropriate for that class at that time. So it could look like, all students could be, the teacher could say, all right, everybody work independently now. I want you to practice the skill that we just learned. So that's one thing that could happen. Another way that we could move on in a lesson is teachers can pull small groups in person, say, socially distancing, obviously, but working with a small group of students that are in person, and everybody else will be working independently. They could also work with a small group virtually. And then finally, we're really wanting to keep our virtual kids interacting in the class. So we could also have our virtual kids and our in-person kids working together in breakout groups. It's going to completely vary with different lessons. So it's not going to look the same even all day long. Each period might structure a little bit different, but those are all different good practices for our teachers to teach our students. And then Friday, the all virtual days will reflect exactly what we're doing right now.
Fantastic, thank you. And now to our middle school sample schedule.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Ms. Bonner.
Sure.
The middle school sample schedule, the one thing I just wanted to add, much like the elementary, it's almost business as usual. This schedule really is not a variance on what we've been doing. As you can see here, this is a typical middle school sample schedule. Really, the students will be following the same schedule that they have been following currently in our virtual setting. And if you look at the top, much like the elementary, students will be received at the door by staff greeters. Students will be expected to log on by 8:20. Teachers will have their cameras on for 4 hours in the morning, engaging and interacting with both in-person and virtual students and using different modalities to do that. And as I mentioned to you, this is a continuation of our current middle school schedule. So there really should not be too much of a learning curve moving forward as we move into a hybrid setting.
Thank you, Dr. Freeman. Next slide, please. So Columbia High School, Principal Sanchez, please give us your thoughts.
Sure. So for the high school, like the middle school, we will be continuing our A/B schedule, or at least we will be continuing the same sort of schedule. The only changes we have will be the way we are arranging our periods. And that's so we could stagger students coming in and make sure we have the safest possible environment for our students. So our students who are fully virtual will follow the same schedule as the students who are in the building through the hybrid. So for example, one cohort will be in the building, an A day and B day, and you can see following our 50-minute schedule, 50-minute period schedule. And then they will have conferences after lunch. And then on a Tuesday during the B day, period 9 will be fully virtual. This is how they will continue 2 days later. The cohort that was at home would now come to school, and this cohort that was at school would then go home. For Fridays, we will not have students in the building. And just to be clear, we will have it be 100% virtual day. What that looks like will be similar to what we have with an A/B day rotate. But there'll be more details to that when we get closer to February. But again, it will be a fully virtual school day. And so if you look at the next slide, you can see what that could look like for your child. So for example, if your child has a lunch, which is period 6, they would not come to school at 8 o'clock in the morning under day 2. I'm sorry, they would leave early on block 4 on A day, right? They would see lunch period 5 usually. So on that block 4, they would go home earlier. 2/3 of the cohort would still stay in the building. If your child had, let's say the next had lunch period 6, then he or she would come in later in the day on the B day. So that's the only thing that we're doing, Dr. Taylor, that's a little different, is that we're rearranging the periods to stagger the students coming in or leaving, so we could make sure that our halls are much clearer.
Thank you, Principal Sanchez. And I know that there were a few questions around the terms asynchronous versus a virtual Friday. So thank you for sharing that clarification. Next slide, please. So academics and technology. And again, will students need to bring their laptops for school for in-person instruction, or will they use school Chromebooks when in the building? So I know that we answered this earlier, but we're just trying to make sure that we're inclusive of sharing variations of similar questions so that we can make sure that everyone knows that their voices are valued. Again, do we want to give this to CNI here or Mr. Bonds?
Sure, I'll be glad to answer. As the slide says, in essence, we're asking that the students bring in the devices that they use during virtual instruction. If that device is not available due to it being a desktop or it's being shared by another family member, there will be another a survey that goes out to families trying to gauge requests for additional devices, and the school district will provide Chromebooks to those families or to those students.
Thank you. That's an important caveat there. We know that when students start coming to the buildings again, the device that they use at home may not be a Chromebook. It may be something else. And this may create more of a need within our families. And so we are very sensitive to that. And we want to make sure, in the name of equity, that we're able to continue to assist families who are in need of a device, and also understanding that situations at home also change, right? So we are very, very sensitive to that. Next slide, please. How will students in each model do work and submit work? Will students in school use Chromebooks or work on paper? Can students hand in paper assignments safely? Can students use Chromebooks safely in school? Many families are finding that Chromebooks are inadequate for the multimedia necessary in Canvas. And so here's the response here. Students will utilize Canvas, our learning management system, to submit their work. Work will be submitted through Canvas using the online section, the online assignment section in Canvas. If a paper assignment is required, students will have the ability to take a photo of that paperwork and upload it into Canvas. Some of our district's older Chromebooks do not have the necessary technical specs to display multimedia rich content. Primarily, Chromebooks will be used for general content creation and submission. Anything else to add to that, Mr. Bonds?
No, that pretty much sums it up. The Chromebooks, yes, while especially some of our older devices aren't, they were never meant to be rich multimedia consumption tools. They're meant to be primarily light web browsing tools. Use of Google Classroom, websites, things along those lines, they work well for, but some higher volume or rich multimedia content, they just can't handle. I agree with that sentiment.
Yeah. Dr. Taylor, I just want to add that Ms. Bodnar and I have been working with the K-12 staff and the supervisors to make sure that any type of assignment can be digitized at any point. We're going to try to extensively limit the use of paper and passing in of assignments. So as you mentioned, taking pictures of assignments if you're at home, or using a digital version in through Canvas is going to be our top priority. So we'll make sure to make that a seamless transition.
Thank you. Next slide, please. For those who may have just joined us, again, this is our live Q&A session following our digital webinar town hall regarding our restart schedule for January the 19th. We have many of our district leaders on to help us in responding to some of these questions. We received more than 200 questions, and we've rebucketed them to try and create some, I guess, thread through the questions to be able to respond to each. Right now, we have 354 community members who've joined us on WebEx and about 208 who are on our YouTube channel. So again, welcome and thank you for participating. So the next question here, we've answered a little bit a little while ago, but we're going to revisit it. Teachers and live streaming. Why don't we give this question to our CNI team.
So I could take this one if you want, Dr. Freeman. Sorry.
No problem.
Live streaming, teachers will be live streaming directly from their classes. And we know that there may be some issues with sound, but we are going to tackle them and troubleshoot them as best as possible. We might have a little bumps in the road in the beginning, but we will be working with Mr. Bonds and his team to make sure that sound is at its best quality. But also, I do want to remind you that if our teachers will be reaching out in the afternoons to small groups and one-on-one with students who were virtual for that particular day, to check in to see if they missed anything, to reteach something if they, missed out on something, or if the connection was poor or volume and sound had issues. So they do have that afternoon time to be able to talk to the teachers and kind of check in and see what's going on.
I'll just add on to that a little bit. So just to answer again, to make sure that we're giving a real framework type of answer, teachers will be live streaming, right? So as Dr. Friedman and Ann Bodner said a little bit earlier, the cameras will be on in their classrooms for the full 4 hours of the morning. And even to the next step, teachers will still be engaging with students through their devices. They'll still be doing small groups through their devices. They'll still be having discussions through the cameras on their devices. And we also know that, though we're in a pandemic, our classrooms have been socially distanced with the seating charts. And so teachers will be able to move around a little bit, but of course, being cautious on their 6 feet of distance between themselves and students as well. What we've seen that it's worked well in other places is you spin your laptop around while you're doing your walk around the classroom so that students who are at home can see that, right? And they can also still see their classmates on their screen because the classmates will still be logged on through their devices. I hope that that helps anyone who had that concern. Next slide, please.
Muted, Dr. Taylor.
Thank you. Teachers in live streaming, I'm sure that our teachers and students are having the same muting concern daily as well. Teachers in live streaming, when the hybrid system is fully implemented, will teachers be simultaneously teaching those students who are online from offsite and those who are present in the classroom? And so we've already answered that question, but of course the answer is yes. But as Dr. Friedman noted, it's a very nuanced yes, right? There's not every classroom will be doing everything the exact same way, but they will all have the same framework to connect students to their classrooms. Why can't learning remain as is for our youngest learners, K-2, who are planning to remain virtual? And that's a very thoughtful question, and I think it's been answered through our previous answers. Was there anything to add regarding our K-2 youngest learners from the CNI team? I think there's anything going on there. Just to move us, I can say that that legally, right? We're bound to be able to move to a hybrid setting if our health and safety is in place, and so we can't, within the realm of the governor's executive order, have students remain virtual due to just our selection, right? It has to be a health and safety challenge that keeps them remaining virtual. That's my understanding of the governor's executive order that was given this summer. Next slide, please.
And Dr. Taylor, can I just add that I think our teachers, who I think all the public has seen transition so beautifully with online learning, are really going to do the same with hybrid. We've had lots of conversations with our teachers. So I think our teachers, in concert with our supervisors and building administrators, are really preparing for this. And we'll definitely meet that challenge, just like they met the challenge for online learning in September.
Thank you, Principal Sanchez. And on that last line of that question, it asks if teachers can live stream from the classroom. And again, we are reiterating that the answer to that question is yes. Next slide, please. If my child remains fully virtual, will their class and teachers remain the same? So the same teacher would teach to classroom and video at the same time. Second question, can you say with certainty that students K through 5 will not have to change their class teacher regardless of their choice, virtual, hybrid? And again, just reiterating the answers to these questions. If your child remains virtual, their class and their teacher will remain the same. Their class and teacher will not be shifted due to their choice of a family for virtual or hybrid. There are, of course, small things that can happen, and I say small meaning not very. I'm hearing some feedback here. Is everyone muted? Just wanted to make sure. Thank you. So there are anomalies that happen that might force the change of a class, but these are not things that will be connected to virtual or hybrid choices. Those teachers will teach that same group of students regardless of their choice. Next slide, please. All right, this is a question about scheduling. Dr. Friedman and Ann Bodner, do you want to tackle this one?
I can tackle that. On the slide previously, we don't have to go back to it, but this will be up on our website that you can go back and look. But on the slides that have the schedules, you will see that that period of time is for students to pick up their grab and go lunch, to travel home, and to eat. So we do need to give students the opportunity who are in person to get home and have their lunch and pick up their lunch from the school cafeteria if that is what they're doing.
All right, so this is a similar question that we had a little bit earlier, but there's that first bullet, something that we have not discussed before, as far as students switching classrooms with the same cohort, or will new teachers come into their classrooms, or how does that work? The next question was, again, health and safety. Also, academics, will all kids be 6 feet apart for in-person instruction? And if a child goes in and does not feel safe with the setup, can they immediately switch to virtual learning? I think that we spoke to that question. And will people who have left the class have the opportunity to rejoin the class? And perhaps that is speaking to people who have, just the families who have withdrawn students, or it could mean to, referencing students who have gone virtual from hybrid. Dr. Friedman and Ms. Bodner would like to respond to these, please.
Sure. So, Ms. Bodner can chime in with me, but let's tackle the second and third one first. We kind of addressed those in previous slides. With all kids being 6 feet apart for in-person instruction, if child goes in, does not feel safe, yes, the answer is they can switch to virtual learning. Our priority is the safety of students and staff. If a student does feel uncomfortable in that setting, we want to be able to adjust the modality of learning that best meets the needs of the student. We will work with the families to make sure that we figure out that best modality as much as possible. We just ask that whatever you decide, that you you give it a chance, and this is all a work in progress, but we will make every effort to make any setting as safe and as comfortable as possible. The third one, Will people who have left the class have the opportunity to rejoin? The answer is yes. Depending on enrollment numbers, I can't see, like Dr. Taylor said, if this is someone that had left to go from one setting to another, will they be able to re-enroll? And I think that's what that question means. And so the answer is yes. The first one, will students be switching classrooms with the same cohort, or will new teachers come into their classrooms? So that's going to vary by levels, and I'll let Mr. Sanchez talk to it at the high school level, but at the elementary level, the students will be staying in their classroom, and different teachers will be coming in. Ms. Bodner, do you want to confirm to me the
Yes,
middle school setting?
I can confirm to you that at the elementary level, our specialists will be moving into the homeroom classes. And at the middle school level, the students will be moving from class to class, but you will also notice in the schedule that there is a longer switching time so that they can stagger the students throughout the hallways.
At the high school level, students will also be switching from class to class. That was something that we considered when we thought about different periods structure. In other words, if we were going to have 8 periods in one day or have 4 periods. This way, students just go to no more than 4 different classrooms in a single day. So that was something that we considered, and why we decided to choose our current schedule the way it looks. Students will be 6 feet apart in the hallways. We kind of did a little dress rehearsal with SATs a couple Saturdays ago, and we definitely made sure and had students come in logistically through different doors, as well as different areas of the building. And it was raining that day, so we even had students in the hall before we could check them in, and so it worked pretty well. And of course, we look forward to starting that with the students on January 19th as well.
Thank you, everyone, for your response to that. And just again, to frame the information for everyone, elementary students, their specialists will come to them. Secondary, middle, and high school, the students will switch classrooms, and these classrooms will be set up, and many already are, in a 6-foot type of design to mandate social distancing. And also at the secondary level, we have a desk for the first cohort of students who come into first period, and then an alternate desk for the students who come in for the next period, so that students won't be sitting in the same place back-to-back periods. And of course, with our mask mandates. Next slide, please. So this is a question around our elementary schools. The first bullet is: during the town hall presentation, it was shared that in phase 3 at the elementary level, all students will be receiving specials at their regular scheduled class time. Will specials classes be taught live by instructors to the entire class, cohort A, cohort B, and virtual students synchronously? The next bullet: how will specials be handled for 5th grade students? Will the in-person hybrid students be physically going to gym and music and art room and library? If so, how will the students who are visually learning from home participate? For example, if the hybrid students are doing PE outside at the school, will the virtual students be watching a pre-recorded video instead? So I know that Ms. Bodner and Dr. Friedman responded to similar questions, but anything to add for these two?
I don't think there's much to add. When it comes to PE, we are working with our PE department and talking to them. We've been talking to teachers an awful lot. I worked with a huge group of teachers for my task force, our CNI task force. So they've been very vocal on things that they feel are important. And one of the things that I will continue to do is talk to our PE teachers or our lead PE teacher and talk about how we can ensure that our both students virtually and in person are getting an actual PE class. Outside, we also have to check with our connectivity for outside, if our PE teachers can bring a device outside. So I don't want to say anything for sure about PE, but that's really the only one we're still trying to figure out in that sense.
Thank you. And so again, the answer is that our specialists at the elementary level will be going to the classrooms when it gets warmer and we're able to use outside. We will of course be doing that and working through. Again, this is a challenging time, we know, for everyone. And so we're also trying to be creative in the work that we're doing. Very specifically, again, regarding the specialists, they'll be coming to the elementary classrooms, whereas in the secondary, that the students will be moving around in a very controlled manner, as Principal Sanchez described. And also just to remember that every school has a pandemic response team that's helping them to work through some of these granular concerns similar to movement around buildings, et cetera. Next slide, please. All right, if we opt for all virtual, how many hours of live instruction per day can we expect at the second and third grade levels? If it is not possible to give an exact number of hours, can you provide a range or sample schedule? The next bullet, if my child who is a third grader chooses all virtual, does that mean that he will lose his current teacher and have a new virtual teacher? And again, I believe that we've answered both of these questions and also provided a sample schedule earlier. And I saw it was shared with me that there are a few parents in the chat speaking about concern about echoing that could occur if students are in their classrooms and they have their devices and teacher has their devices, and there may be a need for earphones or students to really have more experience with muting and unmuting to avoid some of those concerns around echoing. And so we're definitely making note of that for further investigation. Next slide, please. Dr. Friedman, can you hear me, please? Yeah, there you go. Typing furiously. Thank you. For our middle schools, for middle school kids who switch classes with each subject, how will the live instruction be divided among subjects? MMS hybrid schedule reduces class time back to 30 minutes per subject. Why not remove rotation and keep the class lengths longer? We are concerned about the reduction in live instruction at middle school. Why aren't classes being broadcast live as they will be from CHS? And if they can't be, how will asynchronous learning look differently from the spring? So a few really good questions here. And so a caveat before we pass it along, I think some of our previous responses also link nicely to this question that what you are experiencing now, if you have a middle school child, will be almost identical to what you're going to be experiencing as far as live instruction opportunities and also asynchronous opportunities. We are trying to serve students who have a multitude of learning styles. And so we understand that not every student is going to learn the same and not every family dynamic is the same. Dr. Friedman and Ann Bodner, any additional information for this question?
I don't think so. I think you answered it completely.
Yeah, you answered pretty extensively. You know, kind of just to piggyback off of what you said, you know, Ms. Bodner and I have been working pretty extensively with the supervisors and the teachers directly to really focus on streamlining the content that is taught while still covering all the necessary standards. So, you know, we're very confident that we will get through in a meaningful way all the necessary content that is required of each particular content area and grade level. So, you know, that's a continual process that we will continue to evaluate as we move forward with the hybrid setting. But Don't let the shorter class periods make you feel like we're not going to cover as much content, because we've been working on best practices and instructional strategies to assure that we get through the necessary things that we need to.
Thank you. And again, while we are having this live Q&A, our principals and our academic supervisors and all those other folks who contribute so much to our district, our assistant principals, the classroom teachers, they are also fantastic resources that can be that can be an access to understand some of the reasoning for their scheduling methodology. We also have assistant principals whose job really centers a lot on scheduling. So they are definite resources. And while our middle schools are not identical, they worked very similarly. So feel free to reach out to them as well for further information if you are a middle school parent and your question wasn't answered as completely as you may like in this setting. Next slide, please. All right, so now we're moving to Friday schedules. Do cohorts A and B convene virtually in one class on Fridays? The short answer to that one I know is yes. On Fridays, current information simply says that all virtual hybrid is a 4-hour mix of live instruction, pre-recorded instruction, independent work in small groups, plus 1 hour live with the teacher in the afternoon. How much of the 4 hours will be live? I think that we responded to that, it'll be similar to what you are experiencing right now. Every day in every class, we know is including all these things. And so your Friday, if I had to try and categorize it, your Friday will be most similar to what you are experiencing now. Third bullet, on Fridays, when all elementary students are learning remotely, will the full day of instruction be live interactive broadcast to the entire class, maintaining the current remote learning model we've been experiencing the last 4 months? The answer is yes. And the last question here, why would Fridays not shift back to full days of school, i.e. 2:30 for middle schools, if it's all remote for all students? So one key component that we have in our virtual days is that we still have very thoughtfully and intentionally planned for families who have to come pick up lunches. There has to be a window there. We have hundreds of families who still come to our district to pick up lunches. And some of these families have students that are in multiple grade levels. So one reason for that window in the middle of that day is to allow for families to be able to come to our school district and pick up meals from our feeding sites. Next slide, please. How can you ensure that our children will have an equal or better educational experience under the hybrid system than they are in the present all virtual model, when teachers will need to be focused on students live in their classroom and students on screen at home? Well, I think this question speaks to the work that we're doing, right? We're not here to promise that on the first day of hybrid, every single thing's going to be perfect. But I think as Dr. Friedman and Principal Sanchez and Ms. Botner all have echoed, we're growing. We believe in the growth mindset. Today in virtual learning was, I believe, night and day comparison to the first day of school this year. So we're going to hit some bumps in the road. There are things that we're going to get better at, but we know that for students and families who want a hybrid approach, who really miss having the in-person exchange with their classmates and teacher, that they would say that the mental health anguish from not being able to be in school is also something that is really challenging for them right now. So again, we know that it won't be perfect on the very first day of school. We know that there are many out there who are very comfortable right now with the all virtual model, but the governor's executive order calls for us to try and launch our hybrid when we believe it is safe to do so. So we will comply with that. And we also value the in-person experience of our teachers and our students and our administrators. And lastly, we know that this is a very personal choice. Families who select all virtual versus hybrid, that's a very personal choice that each family has to make, and we respect that. Next slide, please. Okay, health and safety. Next slide, Mr. Bonds. This question, why is the district opening when COVID-19 regional risk matrix for New Jersey is high? Does the Department of Health consider local data to make closure and opening decisions? Can you please explain the district's rationale on opening now when the numbers in New Jersey are as high as they've been? What evidence are you drawing on that supports the notion you can do this safely? And so this is a health and safety question. And what I've tried to reiterate over and over again is that when it comes to health and safety, that we are empowered with a fantastic group of health professionals, with our lead nurse, Nurse Porter, as well as our Department of Health local leads here in our community. So I'm going to pass this question to Nurse Porter.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. And thank you, everybody, for your questions. I will be quick. It is already 8:32. The COVID-19 regional risk matrix is used by the local health departments to give us guidance as to how to open, when to close. And yes, it is high. It is high in Essex County. It is high in New Jersey. And you don't have to go to the next slide yet, but when you read the next slide, which we also showed last Thursday, at the high level, it says to consider implementing full remote learning. The key word there is consider. We do not have to implement full remote learning until we're at the very high risk, which we hope we don't get to. And at that point, of course, the local health department will give us the guidance on closure. So we do have permission to open in person from the New Jersey Department of Health according to this matrix, but we must open under strong mitigating strategies. We've gone over them before. Most importantly is masking. Then we go to 6 foot social distancing, hand hygiene, and cleaning and disinfecting. So that is the reason why we're opening when we're high, because we do have the guidance that says that we can, and we will do it very, very carefully. So the last one, what evidence are you drawing on to support the notion that you can do it safely? The evidence is based on the CALI score, that's the COVID activity level index, that will tell us whether or not we can open or close. And there's also some new and encouraging evidence from the CDC that does suggest they have recognized that globally school reopenings with strong mitigation strategies have not been associated with spikes in infection in the school setting. And that's based on schools that have opened before us and globally. And the next thing that just came out from the CDC December 18th, I'm going to read it, says, that compared with children who tested negative for the virus that causes COVID-19, children who tested positive were more likely to have gone to social gatherings, not wearing a mask, and not more likely to have attended school in person under mitigating strategies. So I hope that helps to say why we're trying to get everybody back safe and healthy, and we look forward to it. Next slide, please. This, I just want to remind you, we showed this last Thursday night, and that shows low risk, which we were in the summer, then it went to moderate, we're at high now, and the very high risk is where it says implement fully remote learning. This can be found on the New Jersey website. Anybody's welcome to look at it, and it is used by the local health departments. And then the next slide, please. Okay, one of the questions, if it hasn't happened already, is do we use just Essex County and state information to decide on closure, or do we actually look at our own information? And believe me, we look at our own information. We are in daily contact with the Department of Health. The school nurses will be in daily contact, as will the administrators of the schools and the district. So this is just an example of the different individual scenarios that might happen in a classroom or a school in our own district, and what the closure recommendation might be, whether it be partial or full. And so, yes, we do look at what is going on in our schools, and we also made reference to the new dashboard that's going to come out in January that will give everybody some information on what's happening in our schools. Next slide. Okay. Dr. Taylor, do you want to read the question?
Nurse Porter, you were doing so well. I was mesmerized by your presentation, but I will read. What will the district's protocol for vaccinations be? Will staff and teachers be mandated to be vaccinated? And in the second bullet, there is some new guidance presented that recommends that young students be in person at any level of community spread and need only 3 feet of distancing in classrooms. Will you consider this guidance? We are truly hoping for more than 2 half days for our youngest learners this year.
Okay, thank you. First of all, can I just say how exciting this is about vaccinations? I am over the moon about it. The district's protocol for vaccinations will reflect whatever the New Jersey Department of Health says as far as mandated recommendations, and we will keep you abreast of that. And please stay on top of how this is rolling out and when it's going to be ready for everybody. The second one about the new guidance, the World Health Organization has done many studies about the idea of the droplets dropping 3 feet and the concentration decreasing. We've talked about the CDC does say 6 feet. They do believe that our youngest learners might have less of a concentration and it might drop within 3 feet. So if that guidance becomes accepted by the CDC and the New Jersey Department of Health and then recommended to us, then certainly we will consider that guidance. Thank you. Next question. Oops.
Why are you allowing mask breaks inside the buildings at all? That seems unwise. If you're allowing mask breaks, why not let the kids have breaks to drink and eat? No mask off for biological needs should mean no mask off for any reason. Will entry and exit protocols be the same for pickup? How will the students have a snack drink during their 4-hour day? Most elementary school students cannot go more than 2 or 3 hours without a snack or a drink. Thank you. Just before Nurse Porter answers, just know that we did do a deep dive into this information. This was not a haphazard response or placement into our reopening plans. And now I will yield to Nurse Porter.
Okay, thank you. Masks are really many of our questions were around masks. So I hear your concerns, I acknowledge them, and we are doing the best we can with our mitigating strategies. So everybody is expected to wear a mask. We are allowing mask breaks because it is recommended by science, by the New Jersey Department of Health, and by the Road Back, which is the blueprint for which we set up our plan. We, in our district, are being more strict with mask breaks than what was recommended by the Department of Health, and we are asking that they are 5 minutes indoors, ideally with the windows open, or 10 minutes outdoors, and we do look forward to good weather when we can have some outdoor opportunities for a mask break. There has to be 6 feet social distancing when that happens. So that's the reason why we are allowing it. We are asking that teachers are the ones who will orchestrate the mask break so that we know that everything is in order. And students may take a drink of water when they do have a mask break. So of course, it has to be done very carefully. The mask, as I demonstrated before, folded in half, put in a safe place so that they can drink and not get the mask wet. But while I'm on it, if anybody's mask does get wet, soiled, or ripped, we do have additional masks for students available for them. So that's always good news. The expectation is that all students and teachers will wear masks. I will repeat, the mask should not have a valve. The mask should not be a gaiter or a scarf or a kerchief. Those have not been proven to be as efficient as a mask that covers the nose and mouth, which I happen to have right here. So this is the type of mask that people will be wearing to cover the nose and mouth. And that is what people wanted me to be clear about. And cloth masks that are washable are more economic, but disposable masks are fine. We did mention pandemic response teams. Somebody wanted to know how we were going to make sure. Our pandemic response teams are going to make sure that we as a staff will remind students the mitigating strategies, and we'll just always be saying mask up, back up, wash up, whatever we need to do to help them out. Okay. So that's that. Okay, entry and exit protocols be the same for pickup. The pandemic response teams are they are led by your principal, and they are going to decide on the controlled movements in the building. And it does start with entry that will be assigned, exits that will be assigned. It'll also depend on exits will depend on who's getting lunch. At the entry, there will be a greeter, somebody to remind the kids, put your mask up, to remind kids not to touch each other, to remind kids to be socially distanced, and get to class where they will get going with their learning. And you will find out from your own schools about entry and exit protocols. Okay, snack and drink is definitely a deep dive. And we know that elementary school students, especially on a 4-hour day, are used to having a snack. I will tell you that we talked a lot with the Department of Health and our district physician, as well as the school nurses, principals. We've talked a lot about snack, and right now the recommendation is that there will be no snack time on the 4-hour day. Students, please bring a water bottle. Parents, please offer a hearty breakfast to your children. And students, please eat that hearty breakfast that's offered by the parents. Or if there's a breakfast program in a school, then that is also a great recommendation. Students with a medical reason to eat a snack during the day, allowed to under their medical management plan, their IEP, or their 504. This will be on a case-by-case basis. And as Dr. Taylor has said many times, our restart and recovery plan is fluid. We will ask the teachers how it's going. We'll ask the students. We'll ask the parents. We'll see what the adherence to our mitigating strategies are. And we will maybe consider outdoor snack time when it gets better. But first, let's get everybody back and see how it works, and then adapt as we go forward. Anything else? Do we have another one?
I think that's the nurse porter.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
And so, as Nurse Porter said, we know that that this is fluid, and that changes in COVID protocols are based on the advice that we get from our local health providers, our local health leaders, as well as the state and CDC. But we're starting off very conservatively, and there could be things that change as we move forward and reflect on our openings. So this section will be strictly around and about Columbia High School, and Principal Sanchez is here to assist us. Next slide, please. For students who have taken driver's ed, will they be able to finally take the test for their permits? How will you handle choral activities? Will you consider holding classes outside once the weather gets nicer in the spring? How are you safely handling change of class at the high school? And remember, we pulled these questions directly from the submissions. So these are real high school parents who have real high school questions. Principal Sanchez.
Sure. So regarding the driver's ed test, although students can take the driver's ed test at local DMVs, we will strive our best to continue that opportunity where we allow students to test in the building. So we first wanted to do that with our SATs. Now that we have finished that, we are ready to start scheduling those tests. The only issue we have is that they have to be monitored by teachers who are certified as driver's ed instructors. And now that we have that portion considered and done, we will begin scheduling for those tests in the winter and spring. Regarding choral activities, we are excited about our arts programming. And yes, come springtime and when the weather gets warmer, we will definitely be outside. We've already talked with our incredible directors for our musical as well to consider the same. At this point, in the winter, we plan to have students in our larger rooms for choral activities as well as the auditorium. So we will be working with our building administrators to tackle logistical items like this, as well as our pandemic response team. And finally, how will we handle class changes? As you can see, we went from a 5-minute break between classes to a 10-minute break between classes. And that is to facilitate movement in the building, to have staggered changing times. And we also will be working with our pandemic response team to talk about flow in the building and definitely to designate certain staircases as up or down staircases. So those are things that we will be doing to ensure your child's safety as well as your child's return to school.
Thank you, Principal Sanchez. And just to reiterate, we're being very thoughtful about the flow of buildings. There are some buildings and some sections of buildings where you can have one way only, but in other buildings or other parts of buildings, it's not possible because students will have to walk around the entire hallway on the outside of the building, which would be just an entire lap around the entire building. So we're trying to make decisions that are thoughtful and also reasonable. And just regarding the choral activities, this also goes for our middle schools. We want to continue to have choral activities. We also want to continue to have instrumental practices with wind instruments, but it's really governed by the size of the spaces that are available and when they're available or when outside is available. Next slide, please. Can you confirm that once school reopens, there will be soap and hand towels stocked in the bathrooms? In the past years, this has always been an issue. At CHS, if all virtual is selected, can students elect to switch to hybrid? When can that be done? Will all siblings be in the same cohort at CHS? PE at CHS, will mask requirement be enforced?
I can say yes, that once school opens, there will be soap and hand towels because that is something that our pandemic response team and our building administrators will be looking for. I know I'm new, but you can trust me. I'm in the building now, and I just stepped out for dinner. I walked by, I think, 4 or 5 hand sanitizing machines from the front door to my office. So not only do we have soap and towels in the bathrooms, Mr. Roth and Mr. Romaine and our custodial staff has really retrofitted all of our buildings with sanitizing equipment. So that right there is, I think, a great start to alleviate any of your concerns. If all virtual is selected, can one switch to hybrid? Again, we really need that to only happen from virtual to hybrid, at least at the high school, at the marking period, because we really need to figure out how our cohort sizes. And I'm just speaking for the high school, going from hybrid to virtual, that's a much easier situation. And we could easily do that on a daily basis. I mean, not that we could switch every day, but I'm saying it could be easily considered for a day. And yes, siblings will be in the same cohort. If they are not at first, because we may not have realized it's different last names, you just need to call our main office and we will take care of that. But yes, we want this to be as convenient as possible, and masks requirements will be enforced. At the high school, I can say that we have a little bit of experience with students on campus with sports. And I think Mr. Mullen, our coaches, I visited many practices, all of our teams' practices or a game, and it was great to see students do that, and that was outside. And we will make sure for our teacher safety and our student safety that on campus, all students will wear their masks, even in PE. So thank you.
Thank you. And also just to reiterate that there's been hand sanitizer stations installed throughout our classrooms and throughout our school district. And we also, with our increased custodial presence, every evening we're deep cleaning our buildings. And so part of that, as Mr. Roth will be able to confirm later on in this presentation, there will be just check-ins all the times in our bathroom. We know sometimes in the past we've heard from parents who've had concerns around soap dispensers being empty or hand towels being empty, and so we want to make sure that we're checking that very often throughout the day. Thank you, Principal Sanchez. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we will now move into the concerns of facilities and transportation, led by our School Business Administrator and Board Secretary, Mr. Roth. All right, so this question is really all about filters. With the filters expected to be received beginning of January, does that timing with installation and inspections feel realistic with a January 19th start date? Are there thoughts to just opening windows? The next bullet speaks about the MERV 8 rating as adequate. Are we saying that the MERV 8 rating for filters is adequate to reduce transmission of airborne type viruses such as SARS? The next bullet, are we to take it that proper and required filters will be in place when school starts? Also, will classrooms be able to accommodate open windows to increase airflow and circulation? And yeah, so let's go to Mr. Roth, all about filters and ventilation.
Okay, thank you. Before answering those questions, I just wanted to preface the conversation and put this into context. Back in June of 2019, a capital plan was approved to address many of the health and safety issues across the district. The buildings are over 100 years old, and many of our HVAC systems 50, 60 years old. The capital plan included the replacement of the HVAC systems. Why? I think many people already know the answer. One classroom could be 110 degrees. You cross the hall and that classroom's barely 60 degrees. Temperature controls don't function. Univents don't meet today's air quality educational standards. So that's why the bonding and the capital plan was approved June of 2019 to address these issues. And then COVID arrived. So the first question, with the filters expected to be received at the beginning of January, is the timing realistic? Well, the timing is tight. I'm not going to try to predict the future. However, I can tell you that 25% of the filters are now in. There's about 425 spaces. We have about 100 of them in. And I want to go back to New Jersey Department of Ed guidelines and standards. The standards for reopening schools, according to the DOE guidelines, is recirculated air must have a fresh air component. That's what many of our univents do, is it's recirculating indoor air and also pulling in external air. So that's all the repair work going on right now to make sure we're pulling in that fresh air component. The guidelines also say to open windows if HVAC is not provided, and filters for HVAC units must be maintained and changed according to manufacturer recommendations. So in short, the answer is yes, we can open windows, and keep in mind, not all of the windows across the district function. There are window replacements and repairs within the long-range capital plan as well. It's within the approved bonding. And there will be classrooms where both will work, and there may be a couple of rooms where we just tell the principals don't schedule classes in those rooms. There will be a follow-up inspection by the district architects the week prior to opening on January 19th. So those remaining issues and a final status of repair work will be assessed. Why is the district stating MERV 8 is adequate? And it goes on from there. The district isn't stating MERV 8 is adequate. The district is actually going by state guidelines, and to the fullest extent possible, the district is trying to exceed the minimum standards. Again, HVAC equipment, 50, 60 years old. It doesn't, many of the units won't support a MERV 13. Generally, the higher the rating, the thicker the filter. It won't even fit in some of our units. So to go above minimum standards, we're putting in the best filters we possibly can put into these units. And yes, MERV 13 is basically where that filtering level for viruses kicks in. But we can't reach that clean room level. Our schools and our existing systems weren't built for that, but we're trying to get as much fresh air into the spaces and do as much filtering as possible. Next question. Are we to take it that proper and required filters will be in place for when school starts? In short, the answer is yes. That's why all of this work is going on. And we're making sure that there is a fresh air component and that the units are clean, and that there's clean filters in there, again, to the highest grade our units will handle. Another note just to make, many of our unit events, they're not the same. We have many different makes and models across the district. So some may only handle a heavy duty or a HEPA filter. Others will handle up to a MERV 8, but we're going to put in the best that we can for that unit. Let's see, the last question. In the town hall, it was stated, note that the highest rated filter in each unit it is rated for will be used. The unit will not support MERV 13. I think I pretty much addressed that. But again, to my understanding, a MERV 13 or higher is required to begin filtering virus-sized particles. Our systems won't handle that dense of a filter. If you force too high of a filter into the system, that will either stop airflow and could possibly damage the unit. So, next slide.
Thank you, Mr. Roth. We're gonna go to the next slide, please.
Okay, transportation. Will drop-off and pickup of students be the same as in the past, pre-COVID-19? First, bus passes should be getting sent out to families by January 8th. They will hit the mail. So the following week, parents should start receiving them. Pickup and drop-off times will change because the bus route schedules have to match school start. Begin and start time, start and end times. Also, bus stops were added to help avoid large number of students gathering at the same location. So there have been some areas where we had 10 to 15 students assigned to a bus stop. Where we could safely add bus stops, we did to reduce the number of students in any particular stop. So let's see, next question. As a parent, if I decide to drop off my child to school by car versus allowing them to ride the bus, is there a protocol I must follow? The first thing we ask is please contact the transportation department and let them know you're changing your mind and your child will not be riding the bus. That is to help prevent delays because the bus driver will wait a little bit to see if someone's there at the bus. If they know the child won't be there, it'll keep the route on schedule a little bit easier. Each school site is a little different. So we're hoping people will still continue to use the bus because if everyone drives their students to school, it will definitely pick up traffic around the facility. But with that in mind, please keep look out for any communications from your building principals regarding procedures. Since our sites, vary in driveway space, and if they're on a main street, back street, the protocols may change a bit. But in general, please obey traffic patterns. While dropping your child off, the child should be able to exit the vehicle and immediately step on the curb. That is to keep the child as safe as possible. So just keep this one phrase in mind: door to curb. The door to curb protocol ensures children are as safe as possible. And of course, it'll be busy, so keep a lookout for pedestrians and people darting across the street, and proceed carefully. And that's the answer to that.
Thank you, Mr. Roth. And just again, to emphasize a few points there, that there's a lot of work occurring. The update that was a part of our virtual town hall was a real-time update as of that recording, just a few days prior to when you saw it on December 17th. And we know that that right now we are projecting that this work will be completed, and the filters will also be installed. But one point that Mr. Roth made, that I think that the question also emphasized, is that are there alternatives if something occurs? If there's a room that can't be used, what do we do then? And that's when we rely on our scheduling and our principals and our assistant principals to decide and help us with managing what rooms may not be able to use. And also, one of the pieces that Mr. Roth really emphasized was making sure that one of our tenants here is making sure that we're getting airflow into every room that's going to be used by our students. So thank you for that, Mr. Roth. Next slide, please. We will now be shifting to specific questions around special services. I just want to acknowledge that we're at 9:03, and I know we advertised this event to be between 7:30 and 9. So thank you to those in the community who are sticking with us. And we know that we're going over a little bit, but we think this is important enough for us to spend a little more time making sure that we respond to our families. Dr. Alegria, we're going to go to special services. The question here, you explained that ELL students and those who receive special services will be able to attend school in person 4 days per week. Can you please clarify which students will benefit from these additional 2 days? Are all ELL students going to be offered 4 days of in-person instruction? And will IEP special services be offered in addition to the 4 hours of academic classroom instruction a student will receive 2 days per week?
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. So good evening again, everyone. We are looking forward to offering as much in-person services as possible to students. And so our ELL students will be offered 4 days of instruction. That is for all grade levels. So that is something that we are working towards and anticipate beginning as we open up our hybrid plan. IEP services will be offered in addition, yes, that is correct, to the 4 hours of academic classroom instruction. So any students who receive related services such as speech, physical therapy, occupational therapy, counseling, they would continue to receive those services. And so we will be working with families as best as possible to determine the best times to provide those services. We will try to come up with times that we can provide those services either in person and also virtually or virtually. And so some students will receive some of their services during the 4-hour instructional day, whether it's virtual or in person, and some students would receive their services in the afternoon, again, whether it's virtual or in person. The students who will be receiving the additional 2 days a week, so they will be coming in for 4 days out of the week for in-person instruction, are students who receive a pull-out resource in their IEP for multiple subjects, and also for our self-contained students. And so we know that we're really trying to, again, increase our in-person opportunities for students who are our most vulnerable students. And so that would be our self-contained and also our pull-out resource program students. The next slide, Dr. Taylor.
Thank you. I'm having a little connection issue here, but I hope that everyone can still hear me. Thumbs up, yes?
Yes.
Yes, all right, great. I'll leave these two questions to you, Dr. Alegria, please.
Sure. I have two questions about inclusion classrooms. One, you said the cohorts would be split alphabetically. What about inclusion classrooms? Will the IEP kids, max of 8 kids, be split 50-50, kept together, or split randomly based on the letter of their name? And number two, also in inclusion classes, which have 2 teachers, will both teachers be in person 4 days a week, or will they alternate in person with the other teacher working remotely with the kids who are virtual on that day? So I'll start with the second part of the question. Both teachers would be in person 4 days out of the week. The teachers in an inclusion classroom, there is one general education teacher and one special education teacher. And so they both are extremely important, of course, to that classroom, but they both have specific responsibilities in terms of working with that inclusion class. And so it is important that they are both there providing the inclusion support services to the students who are in the classroom. So they will be both in person 4 days out of the week. In terms of the split, we are working alphabetically. We do want to also just make sure there is a mix of the students who have an IEP within that classroom. We don't, of course, want to have an inclusion classroom that has all IEP students and no general education peers within that classroom. So while we are looking to split it alphabetically, we are also looking to make sure that we have a balance within that classroom in terms of general education and special education students as well. The second question, my daughter is an inclusion in-class support student at CHS. The presentation shows inclusion students in person 2 days per week. Will this be the schedule for my high school inclusion student as well? The answer to that is yes. When we begin our hybrid program, January 19th, we are opening that up first to our 9th graders. So if your daughter or your child is in the 9th grade, they would come in starting January 19th. If they are in 10th, 11th, or 12th grade, they would start the following week in their 2-day-a-week hybrid program. If they're in a self-contained program, then that would be the 4 days out of the week in person. Next slide, please. As a parent of a child who is hearing impaired, this is a major concern, and I want to know how the hearing impaired students will be allowed to benefit from being able to join their peers in the classroom and their academics not being sacrificed. What accommodations will be provided for the students with hearing impairments in the hybrid model? This is definitely something that we've given a lot of thought to. We've talked to different speech therapists within the district as well. We've talked to our consultant who provides deaf and hearing support for our students. And we have, and we know that ordering the clear masks are very much, popular at this point and hard to get, but we did order and we have received a large supply of clear masks. And so that is absolutely one of the first accommodations that we're putting in place for any students who have a hearing impairment. And also we have some staff members also who too have a hearing impairment and who would benefit and require this clear mask support so that they are able to communicate effectively with their colleagues and for the students, their peers, and also anytime they needed to communicate with a staff member in the building, even if it's going into the office. So we do have some clear masks on hand so that we will be able to use those masks for the students and staff members who are in need during our hybrid program. We also will continue to utilize the FM systems that we have in place. And so if there's any students who have an FM system, whether it's a personal FM system, that would be used. And also if there's any sound field systems within the classroom, we will also be using them as well. Can you please go into greater detail about what this new schedule will look like in terms of what kind of childcare services will the Y be able to provide? So I know that our curriculum department has talked extensively about what the new schedule will look like. So I'll talk a minute about the services that the Y program will be offering. At this point, if you're looking to sign your child up for the Y program, on the day that they are hybrid, they would have the Y program after school. If they are virtual that day, they would have the Y program at an off-site Y location. And we're still working, and that will be from kindergarten all the way up until our upper grades, upper elementary grades, excuse me. We are still working through what Montrose will look like, but that is going to be determined by the interest that the program receives. The Y will be sending out a survey to any interested families so that they're able to gauge the interest and then work on staffing accordingly. But we have considered the supports for the Y, and so if your child is hybrid and in person that day, they would be able to attend the Y and that hybrid cohort in their current school. If they are virtual that day, they would be able to be offsite in a Y location, and then when they come into their in-person hybrid, they would again be in their current building. So we have worked with the Y to ensure we have supports available for students. And for classes with only one teacher, no paras or aides or co-teachers in K to 5, will extra staff be hired to help out in the classroom? This is an area where, as we look at special services, we look at the mandates within an IEP or New Jersey Special Education Code. And if there are paraprofessionals indicated in an IEP for a specific student, whether it's a shared or one-to-one, or even a classroom para, we would make sure to continue to have that supports available for students. If we do not have that indicated in an IEP or mandated by the Special Education Code in terms of class sizes, then that might not be a support that we would offer to put in place. We again would be looking at their IEPs. We would be looking at even a 504 if a student had a one-to-one, but that would be the determining factor in adding in additional staff members.
Thank you, Dr. Alegria. Next slide, please. Technology. Speaking of technology, can you see me, Mr. Bonds? Yes? I'm back. All right, thank you. Technology, please. Mr. Bonds, please.
One of the questions that we received says the explanation of ISP bandwidth indicates that the district needs in a hybrid model will exceed 6 gigabits per second, and they are greater than the available bandwidth from the ISP. What is the impact of this limitation on 1 teachers, 2 virtual learners, and 3 on-campus learners? While bandwidth demands will increase dramatically with live streaming and students utilizing the devices in the classroom, that 6 gigabit per second utilization was an estimate. Similar to in-person learning prior to the pandemic, utilization varies throughout the day based upon need in the class. Not every class will require students to use the devices at all time. In addition, we generally monitor WAN and internet connectivity utilization, and we've set that up with our ISP so that we can traffic shape, which means that we'll provide certain allocations of bandwidth based upon need. We're going to be prioritizing the streaming of teacher content whenever possible on our network, so that limits the impact of the virtual learners, so that they'll still be able to see lessons. In addition, the video conferencing platform Google Meet, which we use, utilizes an adaptive approach where if bandwidth is constrained, it steps back the overall resolution of videos, which decreases the overall bandwidth that's needed. So in essence, if there's heavy network congestion or heavy utilization, the video conference streams would display something along the lines of standard definition videos for the majority of the users as opposed to high definition. So we're looking at a couple of other technological solutions to this, but we feel traffic shaping, filtering, and prioritization of some key users will help with a lot of these bandwidth concerns. We are, again, at the maximum with our current internet service provider, their ability to provide us higher speeds at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Bonds. I had you read that because that GBPS and ISP, I knew you could explain that a lot better than I could. So thank you for that information. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we hope that you found this to be interesting and also most importantly, that it helped you to answer questions within your family, because you have important decisions to make. And as we said earlier, the decision to stay all virtual or come to a hybrid setting is a very personal family choice, and we respect that. And it's our goal to provide you with information so that by January the 4th, you can let us know what that decision is from your family. Thank you for your patience. Thank you to the more than 600 folks who joined us this evening. There are still some very important dates. Next slide, please. Again, your preference form is due back on January the 4th. That form will help us to generate those family cohort letters from the schools. And as Principal Sanchez said, there may be some hitches there where if siblings don't have the same last name, we may not be aware in our system, but we do have the ability to switch those cohorts if it is required. We are closed on January the 18th, and also very excited that our hybrid is due to launch on Tuesday, January the 19th. And we're going to do all we can to make it successful so that on January 25th, we can switch to phase 4. Thank you again for your attention. And on behalf of our Board of Education and our administration and our principals and teachers and assistant principals and academic supervisors and all the support folks who make this possible, we wish you a happy holiday season. Thank you. Everyone have a great night. Thank you, panelists. Awesome job. And we're also going to put this recording up to be able to share with families. So okay. Thank you, everyone. Good night.
All right. Thanks. Good night, everyone.
Happy holidays.